Admiral Sorthak's appendages trembled as he reviewed the battle footage for the 100th time. The massive view screen aboard a Galactic Alliance flagship showed the same inexplicable scene: 23 of his best Kraken warriors dead within seconds of each other. No explosions, no energy weapons, no warning. Just tiny metallic projectiles that had somehow pierced their supposedly impenetrable battle armor with surgical precision. "Impossible," he muttered, his crystalline eyes refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme distress. No species has ever achieved such accuracy at these distances. The human ambassador, Catherine Hayes, stood calmly beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. She was diminutive compared to the towering admiral, but her presence filled the command deck with an unsettling confidence. "Admiral," she said softly, "what you're witnessing is just one squad from our Ghostmaker program. We have thousands." The revelation sent a ripple of electromagnetic disturbance through the bridge crew's neural networks. The Galactic Alliance had encountered many species over its 10,000 years of existence, but humans were proving different. "Your species only achieved spaceflight 3 centuries ago," Sorthak countered, his voice modulator struggling to maintain composure. "You were throwing spears at each other when we were building Dyson spheres." Hayes smiled, a gesture that her xenological training told her might be interpreted as either friendly or predatory by various Alliance species. "True, but while you were mastering the stars, we were mastering something else, the art of precision violence." She gestured to the display, where a new image appeared. A human female lay prone on a rocky outcrop, almost invisible against the terrain. The only indication of her presence was a slight distortion in the air, like a heat mirage. "This is Ghostmaker Sarah Chen. The footage you're watching is from her qualification test. The target was 5 kilometers away, through a magnetic storm, on a planet with 1.8 times Earth gravity." The Admiral's neural tendrils coiled tightly. "No organic being can make such a shot. The calculations alone are done entirely in her head," Hayes interrupted. "Every Ghostmaker can account for wind speed, gravity, magnetic interference, planetary rotation, and dozens of other variables instinctively. We don't use AI assistants or neural augments. Just training, endless training." The footage continued, showing Chen's target, a drone the size of a thumbnail, moving erratically through the storm. A single shot rang out. The drone disappeared. "But why?" asked Sorthak. "Why develop such capabilities when energy weapons exist? When drone swarms can blanket an area in destruction?" Hayes turned to face him fully now, her expression grave. "Because, Admiral, humans understand something that the Alliance has forgotten: the power of uncertainty. Your energy weapons are visible, trackable. Your drones can be hacked or jammed. But a single Ghostmaker, they create fear in a way no other weapon can. The enemy never knows where death will come from or when. They only know it will come." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That's why we're here today. The Nexus Hive is expanding again, consuming Alliance worlds one by one. Your conventional forces can't stop them, but we can." Sorthak's sensory appendages wavered between skepticism and desperate hope. The Nexus Hive had seemed unstoppable, their biological technology adapting to every Alliance weapon and strategy. Could these primitive humans, with their projectile weapons and organic brains, really make a difference? "What do you propose?" he asked finally. "A joint operation," Hayes replied. 100 Ghostmakers deployed across the Hive's expansion front. We'll target their synaptic nodes, their command and control centers. No massive fleets, no planet-wide bombardments, just silence, precision, and fear." The Admiral activated a holographic display of the frontier, where dozens of red markers indicated Hive-controlled systems. "Even if what you say is true, 100 snipers against an entire Hive is more than enough," Hayes finished. "Because we're not trying to kill them all, Admiral. We're trying to make them afraid. And fear Fear spreads faster than any biological weapon, she gestured, and a new simulation appeared. It showed the psychological impact of precision strikes on hive mind species based on data from previous conflicts. The exponential spread of terror through their collective consciousness, the breakdown of coordination, the paralysis of uncertainty. The hive thinks it's invincible because it can adapt to anything it understands, Hayes explained. But how do you adapt to something you can't see? Something that kills your leaders from impossible distances through any defense. Something that disappears like smoke before you can analyze it. Sorfak's neural network pulsed with sudden understanding. The humans weren't offering a traditional military solution. They were offering psychological warfare on a scale the Alliance had never conceived. Your ghost makers, he said slowly, they would be willing to deploy immediately. Hayes nodded. They're already in position, Admiral. Have been for the past week. I've been authorized to inform you that 3 hive synaptic nodes were eliminated during our conversation. The commanders never saw it coming, never even knew they were targeted. The Admiral's appendages went completely still, a sign of extreme shock in his species. You began the operation without authorization. No, Admiral, Hayes corrected gently. We began the operation because we knew you would authorize it. Because you're rational enough to understand that the old ways of war don't work anymore. And because, deep down, you know that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the biggest or the most advanced. Sometimes, it's the one that makes the enemy afraid to sleep at night. She extended her hand, another gesture that could be interpreted multiple ways by Alliance species. So, Admiral Sorfak, shall we proceed with the full deployment? The Admiral stared at her hand for a long moment, his sophisticated neural network processing countless variables, scenarios, and implications. Finally, he extended an appendage in return. Proceed, Ambassador Hayes, and thank you for teaching us to fear again. Hayes' smile returned, and this time there was no ambiguity about its predatory nature. Oh, Admiral, we're just getting started. In the depths of space, Sarah Chen adjusted her position slightly, her cheek welded to her rifle's stock. Through her scope, she watched another high synaptic node floating in the void, its biological tendrils pulsing with alien life. The shot would be nearly impossible, accounting for zero gravity, solar wind, radiation pressure, and the curvature of space-time itself. She smiled. Impossible was what Ghostmakers did best. The shot, when it came, was silent in the vacuum of space, but its echoes would reshape the galaxy forever. Sarah Chen had never seen a sunrise on New Montana, but she'd watched 347 people die in its light. The human colony's twin suns cast perpetual golden shadows across the landscape, creating the perfect conditions for what her instructors called shadow play, the art of using multiple light sources to hide in plain sight. Today would be death number 348, maybe more. Ghost Actual, this is Command, the quantum comm whispered in her neural link. High forces breaching atmosphere in Sector 7. Colony evacuation is 60% complete. You are authorized to engage. Chen didn't respond verbally. Ghostmakers never did during operations. Instead, she blinked twice, sending the coded acknowledgement through her neural interface. Her position, carefully selected 3 days ago, gave her a perfect view of the colony's main approach vector. The ridge she occupied was practically vertical, her gecko suit the only thing keeping her anchored to its face. The first hive drop pod screamed through the atmosphere, its biological hull glowing with re-entry heat. Chen tracked it through her scope, noting its trajectory, its speed, its organic composition. The hive had adapted since their first encounters with Ghostmakers, covering their synaptic nodes with layers of regenerating armor. But Chen had adapted too. The pod was still 2 kilometers up when she took her first shot. The round, a custom-designed hybrid of traditional ballistics and quantum technology, pierced the pod's outer shell precisely where its nervous system clustered. The effect was instantaneous. The the pod's controlled descent turned into a tumble, its biological systems shutting down. Neural strike confirmed, she transmitted via blink code. Target disabled, but that was just the beginning. More pods were entering the atmosphere, dozens of them, each carrying hundreds of hive drones. The colony's automated defenses engaged, filling the sky with energy beams and missile contrails, but Chen ignored them. Her targets were specific, chosen for maximum psychological impact on the hive's collective consciousness. She shifted position slightly, her suit adjusting its camouflage to match the changing light. The next shot would be trickier. A pod moving laterally at high speed, its trajectory altered by the colony's defensive fire. Chen breathed out slowly, letting her augmented nervous system sync with the planet's magnetic field. She could feel the gravitational waves, the solar wind, the minute vibrations in the rock face. The shot, when it came, seemed to bend reality itself. The round curved impossibly, riding the planet's magnetic field lines before striking its target. Another pod fell. Ghost Actual, command cut in, be advised. Hive forces have deployed a new variant. Psychic shielding detected. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The hive was learning, adapting, but they still didn't understand. Physical armor could be penetrated. Psychic shields could be bypassed. But fear was the one weakness they couldn't evolve away from. She switched ammunition types, loading a round that she and the other ghost makers called Whispers. It was their newest development, designed specifically for psychic species. The bullet didn't just kill, it broadcasted the target's final moments directly into the hive's collective consciousness. The next pod she targeted carried what appeared to be a command unit, its biological signature more complex than the others. Chen took a moment to appreciate the irony. The hive had developed psychic shielding to protect against fear, but those same shields would now amplify it. The Whisper round found its mark. The pod didn't explode or tumble like the others. Instead, it simply stopped. Through her scope, Chen watched as the biological hull began to decay, the hive organisms within experiencing something they had never evolved to handle, individualized terror. Ghost Actual, multiple signatures are retreating, command reported, an edge of excitement in their usually stoic voice. The hive is, they're pulling back. Chen maintained her position, knowing that celebration was premature. The hive never retreated, not really. They were processing, adapting, trying to understand this new threat. And when they thought they had a solution, as if on cue, the sky darkened. Not with more pods, but with something worse. A hive monarch, one of their living capital ships. It descended through the atmosphere like a nightmare-given form, its 100-kilometer length blocking out both suns. Traditional military doctrine said that a single ghost maker against a monarch was suicide. But Chen wasn't traditional. She reached into her kit and removed a single round, matte black, barely reflective, with flowing scripts etched into its surface. The round had cost more to manufacture than most planetary defense systems, and she only carried one. The ghost makers called it a god killer. The Monarch's ship pulsed with psychic energy, scanning for threats. Its biological armor was meters thick, its nervous system distributed to prevent single-point failures. It had evolved specifically to counter human snipers, becoming something that should have been impossible to kill with a single shot. Should have been. Chen took a moment to appreciate the challenge. The shot would need to account for gravitational lensing from the Monarch's mass, psychic interference patterns, atmospheric distortion, and dozens of other factors. The margin for error was effectively zero. Perfect. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't think. She became what the ghost makers were always meant to be, a singular moment of absolute certainty in an uncertain universe. The trigger pull was almost an afterthought. The God Killer round left her rifle at a significant fraction of light speed, its quantum core maintaining coherence just long enough to reach its target. When it struck, physics itself seemed to object. The round phased through the Monarch's outer defenses, through its distributed nervous system, through its evolved redundancies, until it found what Chen had known would be there. The one thing the hive couldn't eliminate from their capital ships. The one weakness that evolution couldn't solve. The need for a central consciousness, a focal point for their collective intelligence. The monarch didn't explode. It didn't fall from the sky. Instead, it simply stopped being alive. Like a puppet with its strings cut, the massive organism began to drift, its biological processes shutting down in cascading failure. Ghost Actual, Command's voice was barely a whisper. Confirm monarch neutralization. Chen allowed herself to blink once, the primary acknowledgement signal. Then she began to move, her gecko suit carrying her down the cliff face as the dead monarch's bulk slowly began to fall. She had 18 minutes to reach her secondary position before the ship's corpse hit the ground. Just another day at the office. But as she moved, she felt something new in her neural link: fear. Not from the hive, not from the colonists, but from Command itself. Because they had finally realized what the Ghost Makers truly were. Not just snipers, not just soldiers, but something new. Something that could kill gods with a single shot. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Dr. Zextol's crystalline appendages trembled as she reviewed her research notes. After 6 months embedded with the Ghostmaker training program, the xenanthropologist still struggled to comprehend what she was documenting. The Galactic Alliance had sent her to understand these humans, to demystify their capabilities. Instead, she found herself questioning everything she knew about the nature of evolved intelligence. Document entry 147, she spoke into her neural recorder. The humans have a saying, "Ghost makers aren't born, they're forged." Initially, I dismissed this as primitive metaphorical thinking. I was wrong. She stood in the observation chamber of Earth's Olympus training facility, watching a class of Ghost Maker candidates endure what they called the breaking. 20 humans lay perfectly still in environmental chambers, each experiencing different gravities, atmospheres, and temperature extremes. They had been there for 72 hours. The candidates aren't simply learning to shoot, she continued. They're being fundamentally rewired. Their training begins by destroying everything they think they know about existence itself. Below, one of the candidates twitched, a minute movement that would have been imperceptible to most observers. Immediately, a red light flashed, and the chamber's conditions became even more extreme. Instructor Connor. Zextol called out to the grizzled human monitoring the chambers. The candidate in Chamber 7, will they survive? Connor didn't turn away from his monitors. They all survived, Doctor. Or they were never meant to be ghost makers in the first place. The casualness of his response sent shivers through her crystalline form. But surely there are safer methods. The Alliance has neural imprint technology, combat simulators. With respect, Doctor, Connor interrupted, you still don't understand what we're creating here. We're not training soldiers. We're not even training snipers. We're creating something that has never existed before in human history. He finally turned to face her, his cybernetic eye glowing softly. Tell me, Doctor, in all your studies of galactic civilizations, have you ever encountered a species that could fundamentally alter its own perception of reality through pure will? Zextol's academic subroutines engaged automatically. Several species have demonstrated reality-altering capabilities, but all through technological or biological means. The Quantum Collective, for instance. No, Connor cut her off again. I mean without assistance, without technology, without genetic modification, just the raw power of a trained mind. He gestured to the chambers. What you're watching isn't torture, Doctor. It's transcendence. These candidates are learning to perceive reality at its most fundamental level. Time, space, gravity. These become variables to be manipulated, not constants to be accepted. A display showed the vital signs of Chamber 7's occupant. Despite the extreme conditions, their heartbeat was perfectly steady, their brainwaves almost meditative. But how? Zextol asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her horror. The human brain isn't capable of such calculations. the processing power required to account for all variables in a long-range shot. Connor smiled, a gesture that never failed to unnerve her. That's Alliance thinking, Doctor. You see the universe as a problem to be calculated. We see it as a dance to be felt. Every Ghostmaker becomes a living quantum computer, not by adding technology, but by stripping away the barriers between consciousness and reality. He pressed a button, and the chamber walls became transparent. The candidates were all in the same position, perfectly still, yet somehow conveying an impression of absolute focus. Watch closely, Connor said. Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2 begins now. The chambers filled with holographic targets, each moving in complex, unpredictable patterns. The candidates remained motionless, but Zextal's instruments detected subtle changes in their neural patterns. They're not allowed to shoot yet, Connor explained. First, they have to become the bullet. Become the, I don't understand. Every shot a Ghostmaker takes is fired long before they pull the trigger. In their mind, they've already traveled with the round, felt every force that will act upon it, known every factor that will influence its path. When they finally do fire, it's merely a formality. The kill has already happened in a reality they've already experienced. Zextal's analytical systems struggle to process this concept. You're suggesting they can perceive multiple timelines. That's impossible without quantum processing. Doctor, Connor said softly, what is your definition of consciousness? The question caught her off guard. Consciousness is the emergent property of complex neural networks processing sensory input and… Wrong, Connor stated. Consciousness is the universe observing itself, and humans, Doctor, have learned to be very, very good observers. As if to emphasize his point, all 20 candidates opened their eyes simultaneously. Despite the varying gravitational conditions, despite the extreme environments, their movements were perfectly synchronized. Ghostmakers don't chase excellence, Connor continued. They don't strive for perfection. They simply remove everything that prevents perfection from occurring naturally. Every thought that clouds perception, every emotion that disturbs focus, every assumption that limits understanding. He brought up a new display, showing historical footage of Ghostmaker operations. Zextal watched in fascination as snipers made shots that violated every law of physics she knew. The Hunter's Code isn't about rules or procedures, Connor explained. It's about truth. The truth that reality is more flexible than most species imagine. The truth that consciousness can shape probability. The truth that death is just another form of communication. Zextal's appendages writhed in intellectual distress. But this violates everything we know about cognitive science. The Alliance has studied human brains. There's nothing special about their structure, nothing that should allow this level of perception. Connor's smile widened. Exactly, Doctor. There's nothing special about us at all. We're not stronger, faster, or smarter than other species. We simply decided to stop accepting limitations, to stop believing in impossible things. He gestured to the candidates again. Watch them now. Phase 3 begins, the moment when they stop being individual humans and become part of something larger. The chambers filled with a strange, shimmering light. The candidates' neural patterns began to synchronize, not just with each other, but with the quantum fabric of spacetime itself. My God, Zextal whispered, her scientific detachment finally shattering. They're not just observers. They're becoming quantum entangled with reality itself. Now you're beginning to understand, Connor said. Ghostmakers aren't weapons, Doctor. They're something far more dangerous. They're proof that consciousness itself is the greatest force in the universe. And humans, we're just the first species to fully embrace that truth. As Zextal watched, the candidates began to move in perfect unison, each motion a demonstration of absolute control over their relationship with reality. She realized, with growing awe and terror, that she wasn't documenting a military program. She was witnessing the next stage of human evolution. Final entry, she spoke into her recorder. The Alliance sent me to understand the Ghostmakers. But what I found is something beyond understanding. These humans aren't just changing the rules of warfare, they're changing the fundamental nature of what it means to be conscious. Below, the candidates continued their synchronized movements, each one becoming what Connor had described, not just snipers, not just soldiers, but living proof that reality itself was more malleable than any species had dared to imagine. The Hunter's Code wasn't just a set of rules, it was a new way of existing in the universe, and humanity was leading the way. Floating in the absolute darkness between Proxima Centauri's outer planets, Ghostmaker Elena Reyes understood why ancient humans had feared the void. Space wasn't empty, it was alive with forces most species never learned to perceive. Gravitational waves rippled like ocean currents, solar winds carried whispers of distant stars, and quantum fluctuations danced at the edge of reality. For a Ghostmaker, these weren't obstacles, they were opportunities. Quantum signature detected, her neural link whispered. High stealth station, bearing 03 Mark 17. Range, approximately 47 million kilometers. Reyes didn't acknowledge the update verbally. In space, even radio silence wasn't enough. The Hive had evolved to detect the minute neural emissions of thinking beings. Instead, she adjusted her position using controlled bursts from her suit's cold gas thrusters, the movement so subtle it was practically indistinguishable from natural space debris. The mission was unprecedented: infiltrate and eliminate a high stealth station that even the Alliance's best sensors couldn't reliably detect. Traditional space warfare doctrine said it was impossible, but Ghostmakers had long since moved beyond traditional anything. Her quantum rifle, a marvel of human engineering that looked deceptively like an ordinary sniper rifle, was configured for vacuum operation. The ammunition was even more specialized: self-guided quantum rounds that could maintain coherence across vast distances, designed specifically for void warfare. But the real innovation wasn't the technology, it was what happened in the space between spaces. Reyes initiated the mental techniques she'd learned during her training, allowing her consciousness to expand beyond the confines of her physical form. In this state, she could perceive the quantum entanglement patterns that the Hive used for stealth. Their technology was brilliant. It bent probability itself to hide their presence. Unfortunately for them, Ghostmakers had learned to bend it back. Target station analyzing anomalous readings, her neural link updated, defensive systems activating. Reyes smiled inside her helmet. The Hive was responding to sensor ghosts, phantom readings created by the quantum wake of her consciousness expanding through space. They still hadn't realized that their greatest advantage, their collective consciousness, was also their greatest vulnerability. She began the shot sequence, not by aiming her rifle, but by becoming one with the space between her and the target. Distance became meaningless as she felt every gravitational eddy, every magnetic field line, every quantum probability cloud that her round would encounter. The Hive station shimmered at the edge of perceived reality, its biological stealth systems creating a bubble of uncertainty around it. To conventional sensors, it was practically invisible. To Reyes, it was lighting up like a beacon, its very attempt at hiding making it more visible to her quantum-attuned senses. Multiple defensive platforms detected, her link warned. Hive deploying probability shields. Probability shields, the Hive's latest adaptation to Ghostmaker tactics. They created fields where quantum uncertainty was artificially increased, making precise shots theoretically impossible. Any round fired through such a field would have its path randomized by enforced quantum fluctuations. Theoretically. Reyes initiated the second stage of her consciousness expansion, pushing beyond mere quantum perception into what Ghostmakers called the probability space. Here, in this strange realm between definite states, she could see the mathematical beauty of the Hive's defenses and their fundamental flaw. They were trying to use uncertainty as a shield, but uncertainty itself was simply another form of pattern. Her first shot wasn't meant to hit anything. The quantum round streaked across space, its passage creating ripples in the probability fields. The highest defenses tracked it, adapted to it, prepared for more like it. That was their second mistake. The real attack began in the spaces between possibilities. Reyes had synchronized her consciousness with the quantum state of her rifle, her ammunition, and the void itself. When she fired again, she didn't launch a single round, she launched a cascade of quantum possibilities. To an outside observer, it would have appeared as if she fired normally. But on the quantum level, each round existed in multiple states simultaneously, taking every possible path through space until observation collapsed them into reality. The highest probability shields actually amplified the effect, their attempt to randomize the round's paths, instead multiplying the number of potential trajectories. It was like trying to stop a wave by breaking it into droplets. It only created more vectors of attack. Station defenses at maximum output, a link reported, detecting signs of collective consciousness stress. That was the true target, not the station's physical structure, but the psychological impact on the hive mind. Each quantum round carried not just kinetic energy, but the focused intent of Reyes's consciousness. As they passed through the probability shields, they collapsed into reality in ways that maximized their psychological impact. The effect was devastating. The highest collective consciousness, faced with weapons that seemed to violate causality itself, began to fragment. Their certainty, the foundation of their unified intelligence, was being systematically destroyed. Reyes maintained her focus, letting her expanded consciousness guide each shot. She wasn't just firing at targets, she was rewriting the quantum narrative of space itself. The void between her and the station became a gallery of possibility, each point in space a potential moment of inception for reality-shifting events. The station's stealth systems failed first, their quantum manipulation disrupted by the cascading effects of Reyes' attacks. Then the probability shields began to collapse, their attempts to enforce uncertainty backfiring as they encountered something beyond their ability to quantify. Finally, the station's biological components, unable to maintain coherence in the face of weapons that existed in multiple states simultaneously, began to break down, not through physical damage, but through the fundamental inability to reconcile their existence with what was happening to them. Station experiencing critical consciousness cascade, her link announced. Total systemic failure imminent. Reyes watched through her quantum-enhanced senses as the massive structure began to dissolve, not into explosions or debris, but into quantum uncertainty itself. The highest attempt to hide in probability had made them vulnerable to someone who had learned to weaponize probability itself. As the station's remnants dispersed into space, Reyes began the delicate process of retracting her consciousness, pulling herself back from the quantum realm into normal space-time. The void felt different now, marked by the ripples of what had occurred. Mission accomplished, she transmitted finally, allowing herself a moment of professional satisfaction. Tell command that the new quantum warfare protocols are confirmed effective. But as she prepared for extraction, she felt something else in the void, a change in the quantum fabric of space itself. The hive wasn't just learning from this defeat, they were evolving in response to it. Their next adaptation would be even more sophisticated, even more challenging to overcome. Reyes smiled again. Good. Ghost makers lived for challenges. After all, when you'd learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, the only worthy opponents were those who could do the same. The void whispered its secrets to her as she moved away from the battlefield, carrying stories of what had happened here to the distant reaches of space. And in those whispers, she'd heard the truth that all ghost makers eventually learned. In the space between stars, in the quantum realm where possibility became reality, humanity had found its true calling. Not as conquerors, not as defenders, but as artists of probability itself. The next evolution of warfare had begun, and ghost makers were leading the way into a future where the lines between consciousness, quantum mechanics, and military power had ceased to exist. The target was 19 light-years away. Sarah Chen stood in the quantum firing chamber aboard the HSS Ghost Dance, Earth's most advanced sniper platform, contemplating what she was about to attempt. Around her, a constellation of quantum processors hummed, not calculating the shot. No computer could do that, but maintaining the specialized space-time bubble that would make it possible. Target status update, she subvocalized. Show me the Queen. The chamber's holographic environment shifted, displaying the Hive Supreme Queen's sanctuary deep within the Omega Centauri cluster. The massive biological structure pulsed with psychic energy, its very existence an affront to conventional physics. This was where the Hive's collective consciousness originated, where their billions of drones received their orders. And Chen had to kill it with a single shot, through 19 light-years of space. While it was protected by probability shields, quantum disruption fields, and psychic barriers that could drive most species insane. Ghost Actual, Commander Hayes' voice came through her neural link. Are you certain about this? Even for a ghost maker, this shot, it violates everything we know about physics. Chen allowed herself a small smile. With respect, Commander, that's what they said about our first light-year shot, and our first quantum penetration, and our first consciousness cascade. Those were different, Hayes insisted. This target is, the math doesn't even exist to calculate this shot. The quantum coherence alone. Commander, Chen interrupted gently, you're thinking like the Alliance. Like the Hive, you're thinking with numbers and probabilities. That's not how we work anymore. She stepped into the chamber's central platform, feeling the quantum field begin to resonate with her enhanced consciousness. The Ghost Dance's systems weren't there to help her make the shot. They were there to help her transcend the ordinary limitations of space-time. Initiating quantum resonance field, the ship's AI announced. Warning. Consciousness expansion at this scale has never been attempted. Neural feedback could be fatal. Chen closed her eyes, letting her mind expand into the quantum realm. The sensation was familiar now, like stepping into an ocean of possibility. But this time, she wasn't just dipping in her toes. She was going to dive deeper than any ghost maker had ever gone. Show me the path, she whispered, not to the AI or to command, but to the universe itself. The quantum field responded, showing her not just the physical space between her and the target, but the underlying fabric of reality itself. She could see the gravitational waves from distant black holes, the quantum entanglement patterns that connected distant stars, the very strings that vibrated to create matter itself. And there, woven through it all, was the path. Not a straight line, nothing was ever straight in quantum space, but a probability thread that connected her to the Queen across 19 light-years of void. Ghost Actual, Hayes' voice seemed to come from very far away now. We're detecting unusual quantum fluctuations. Your consciousness is. It's entangling with space-time itself. Chen barely heard him. She was seeing something else now. The true nature of the Hive Queen. Not just its physical form, but its quantum signature, a pattern of consciousness that extended throughout the galaxy. The Queen wasn't just a biological entity, it was a nexus point of reality itself. That was how it controlled its drones across such vast distances. It wasn't using psychic power or quantum communications. It was using the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. My God, Hayes whispered, you're not just going to shoot it, you're going to rewrite its quantum state, Chen finished, from the inside out. She raised her quantum rifle, a weapon that was now more a part of her consciousness than a physical tool. The ammunition was special, a single quantum-entangled round that she and the other ghost makers called an infinity bullet. It had taken a decade to create, requiring technology that humanity had invented specifically for this moment. But the real weapon wasn't the bullet, it was what Chen had become. She began to ease her consciousness into the space between spaces, letting her awareness spread across light years. Distance became meaningless as she existed everywhere and nowhere, her consciousness riding the quantum fields that permeated the universe. The Hive Queen sensed her coming. Of course it did. You couldn't hide from something that was essentially a living quantum computer the size of a solar system. But that was part of the plan. The Queen's defenses activated probability shields that could redirect any physical attack, quantum disruption fields that could unravel the coherence of any ordinary weapon, psychic barriers that could shred an unprotected mind. Chen felt them all, not as obstacles, but as parts of a larger pattern. The Queen had made itself so powerful, so interconnected with reality itself, that it had become vulnerable to someone who could speak reality's language. "I see you," Chen whispered to the quantum void. "I see what you really are." The Queen's response was immediate and devastating. It launched a psychic attack that would have liquidated the minds of an entire planet's population. But Chen wasn't on any planet. She wasn't even in normal space anymore. She had become something else, a quantum observer whose very act of observation could change reality. The infinity bullet began to resonate with her consciousness, existing in multiple states simultaneously. It was both in her rifle and spread across light years of space, both a physical object and a quantum possibility. "Shot solution impossible," the ship's AI announced. "Quantum coherence failing. Recommend immediate." Chen pulled the trigger. The shot didn't travel through space, it changed the nature of space itself. The infinity bullet didn't need to cross 19 light-years because, in quantum terms, it was already there. Had always been there. Would always be there. The Queen's defenses, designed to stop physical attacks and resist psychic assault, encountered something they couldn't comprehend. A weapon that existed in quantum superposition across the entire distance between shooter and target. The bullet struck home in 1,000,000,000,000 quantum states simultaneously, each impact resonating with the others across space-time. The Queen's consciousness, spread across the galaxy, began to collapse not from physical damage, but from quantum observation itself. Chen had forced the universe to observe the Queen's true state, and in doing so, had collapsed its quantum wave function. The entity that had controlled billions of minds across countless light-years began to fail not from the outside, but from within its own quantum structure. The effect cascaded through the hive's collective consciousness. Drones across the galaxy suddenly found themselves disconnected not just from control, but from the fundamental quantum entanglement that made their unity possible. "Target neutralized," Chen reported calmly, beginning the delicate process of retracting her consciousness from the quantum realm. "The Queen is resolved." She felt the change in the quantum fabric of the galaxy, a shift in the underlying pattern of reality itself. The hive wasn't just defeated, it was fundamentally altered. Without their Queen's quantum coherence to bind them, the drones would either evolve into individual beings or cease to function. "Ghost actual," Hayes's voice was barely a whisper. Confirm what we're seeing." "Did you just?" "Yes, Commander," Chen replied, allowing herself to fully return to normal space-time. "I just made the universe observe a quantum superposition it couldn't maintain. The Queen existed in too many states simultaneously. Once it was forced to collapse into a single state, it couldn't exist at all." As the quantum firing chamber powered down, Chen felt something else, a change in herself. She had pushed the boundaries of what even ghost makers thought possible, had become something that perhaps no human had ever been before. She had become not just an observer of reality, but a force of nature itself. "Send word to command," she said quietly. Tell them we've just changed the rules of existence itself." The Ghost Dance's quantum processors hummed softly as they documented what had happened here, a moment when humanity had transcended not just the limitations of physics, but the very nature of reality itself. The impossible shot had been made, and with it, the universe would never be quite the same again. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance had never been so quiet. Representatives from 10,000 species sat in stunned silence as they watched the quantum recordings of what humans had come to call the Queen's Fall. Even the typically verbose quantum collective, beings of pure energy and thought, found themselves speechless. Admiral Sorthak stood at the central podium, his crystalline appendages refracting light in patterns that conveyed both awe and terror. Beside him, Ambassador Catherine Hayes maintained the same calm demeanor she'd shown since that first demonstration of Ghostmaker capabilities years ago. The implications are unprecedented, Solfak finally managed. You haven't just changed warfare, you've changed the fundamental nature of existence itself. Hayes nodded slightly. That was always the point, Admiral. The Ghostmaker program wasn't about creating better snipers. It was about understanding the true nature of consciousness and its role in shaping reality. The chamber's quantum displays showed multiple perspectives of Chen's impossible shot, a moment when a single human had rewritten the laws of physics across 19 light-years of space. The recordings themselves were causing quantum fluctuations in the chamber's reality stabilizers. But how do we know you won't turn these capabilities against the Alliance? A representative of the Silicon Concordate demanded, their crystalline matrix vibrating with anxiety. You've demonstrated the ability to collapse quantum states across interstellar distances. You could theoretically, Hayes interrupted smoothly, we could do many things. But that's not why we're here today. She gestured, and new images appeared in the quantum display. Ghostmaker training facilities being constructed on 100 worlds, their designs shared freely with all Alliance species. We're here to announce that the Ghostmaker program is being open to all sentient species, Hayes continued. Every technique, every quantum insight, every consciousness expansion protocol, all of it will be available to any being capable of learning it. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, electromagnetic pulses, and quantum fluctuations. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. The Ghostmakers had proven themselves to be the most formidable force in known space, and now humans were offering to share their secrets. Order. Solfak's voice resonated through the chamber's quantum field. Ambassador Hayes, surely you understand our concerns. The power to reshape reality itself is too dangerous to be held by any one species, Hayes finished. We agree. That's why we're sharing it. But there's something else you need to understand. She nodded to a figure standing in the shadows of the chamber. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her presence causing subtle ripples in the quantum fabric of space-time. The assembled representatives could feel it, the way reality itself seemed to bend slightly around her, as if understanding that here was a being who had transcended ordinary limitations. Ghostmakers aren't weapons, Chen said quietly, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We're teachers, guides to a new way of understanding existence itself. She raised her hand, and the quantum display shifted to show something that made even the quantum collective pause, a visual representation of consciousness itself, not as a product of neural activity or quantum computation, but as a fundamental force of the universe. What we discovered wasn't just a new way of fighting, Chen continued. It was a new way of being. Every shot we take, every quantum state we collapse, every reality we observe, it's all part of a larger pattern. We're not changing the universe. We're helping it become what it always could be. The display showed Ghostmakers from a dozen different species now, each learning to expand their consciousness beyond ordinary space-time. Some were traditional organic beings, others were energy constructs, and still others defied easy classification. But all of them were learning to see reality as it truly was, a dance of probability and possibility, waiting to be shaped by conscious observation. The hive taught us something important, Hayes added. They showed us that consciousness can be networked across vast distances, that reality itself responds to collective observation, but they tried to control it, to force it into patterns they could understand. We learned to dance with it instead. She gestured to the quantum displays again, showing the aftermath of the Queen's fall, but now the representatives could see something they hadn't noticed before, the way the quantum fabric of space itself had been altered, not damaged, but transformed into something more complex, more beautiful. Fear isn't about power, Chen said, addressing the underlying concern in the chamber. It's about understanding. The galaxy fears ghost makers not because of what we can do, but because we represent a truth many species aren't ready to accept. Reality itself is conscious, and consciousness itself is reality. The chamber was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of comprehension dawning across 1,000 different types of minds. The program is voluntary, Hayes continued. Each species will decide for itself whether to participate. But know this, what we've discovered can't be undone. The universe knows it's being observed now, and it's beginning to observe back. She smiled, and for the first time, the representatives saw not the predatory expression they'd feared, but something else. The joy of a teacher about to share a profound truth. We call ourselves ghost makers, Chen said, not because we hide in shadows, but because we've learned to exist between states of reality. And now we're offering to teach others not just how to shoot across light years, but how to see across them, how to understand across them, how to be across them. The quantum displays showed one final image, the galaxy itself, but not as it appeared to ordinary sensors. This was the galaxy as ghost makers saw it, a vast web of consciousness and possibility, every point connected to every other point through the quantum fabric of space-time itself. The choice is yours, Hayes concluded. You can continue to fear the silence, to wonder what lurks in the quantum shadows between stars, or you can learn to become the silence itself, to understand that consciousness and reality are not separate things, but aspects of the same fundamental truth. Admiral Sorfat's appendages moved in the pattern that indicated deep thought. And if we choose not to learn, then you'll continue to fear, Chen said simply. Not because we wish it, but because fear is a natural response to something you don't understand. But understand this, the universe is changing. Consciousness is evolving. Reality itself is waking up. She raised a hand again, and the quantum fabric of the chamber rippled in response. The question isn't whether you'll join us. The question is whether you'll help shape what comes next, or merely observe it from the shadows. As the representatives began their deliberations, Hayes and Chen shared a knowing look. The seeds had been planted. The next phase of cosmic evolution had begun. And in the quantum silence between moments, in the vast spaces between stars, reality itself held its breath, waiting to see what its children would choose to become. The age of the ghost makers had truly begun. Not as warriors, not as weapons, but as guides to a universe that was far more conscious, far more alive than any species had dared to imagine. The silence was no longer something to fear. It was something to become.